Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at one of the absolutely most fascinating figures of the 20th century, a man whose name is, well, it's literally synonymous with success, ambition, and the American dream. Okay, let's dive into this. We're exploring the life, the legacy, and the deeply hidden secrets of Napoleon Hill. We're going to map out this incredible tension between the massive empire of wealth his ideas built and the actual historical reality of the man who wrote them down.
To really wrap our heads around the scale of this story, we first have to understand the modern legacy of his most famous work, the 1937 classic Think and Grow Rich. Today, this book isn't just popular, it's practically the secret text for entrepreneurs. His concepts? They're the literal blueprints used by icons across eras. Jim Carrey famously wrote himself a $10 million check years before he ever actually earned it, directly applying Hill's concept of a definite chief aim. And Oprah Winfrey? She credits her massive rise to visualizing success, which is another core tenet of Hill's work. From the boardrooms of SpaceX to the founder of Spanx, millions of people use his methodologies every single day to achieve staggering, undeniable success.
So we have this universally revered figure, right? But what if I told you that almost everything he claimed about his own life was a complete and total fabrication? Seriously, what if the undisputed godfather of self-help, the guy who taught the whole world how to be successful, was actually one of the greatest scammers of all time?
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive paradox at the very center of our explainer today. On one hand, we have the legendary teacher of wealth, the man who supposedly sat down with the absolute titans of industry to distill the secrets of the universe. But compare that to the historical reality found in court records and old newspaper clippings. You get a penniless fraud, constantly on the run from creditors, the law, and honestly, even his own family. 15 million. Just let that sink in. That is a staggering number, and it represents how many copies of Think and Grow Rich have reportedly been sold to date. It basically birthed the entire multi-billion-dollar self-help industry, paving the way for everything from The Secret to the prosperity gospel. But here's the catch. The foundation of those millions of pages, it's built on a veritable mountain of historical fabrications.
So, let's systematically dismantle the biggest foundational myth of Napoleon Hill's entire career. Hill built his whole brand on the claim that back in 1908, he was mentored by Andrew Carnegie, who, by the way, was the richest man in the world at the time. Hill said Carnegie basically gave him a 20-year, unpaid mission to interview successful men and unlock the secrets of wealth. The reality? Well, Andrew Carnegie's most respected biographer, David Nassau, looked into this and found absolutely zero evidence that Carnegie and Hill ever even crossed paths. Actually, scratch that. It's worse. Hill only started making this claim long after Carnegie died in 1919, when, conveniently, he couldn't actually refute it.
And you know what? The lies definitely didn't stop with Carnegie. Hill claimed he was a trusted advisor to 2 U.S. presidents. He said he sat right there in the White House with Woodrow Wilson during the World War I armistice negotiations. He claimed he came up with FDR's famous phrase, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." He claimed he interviewed Henry Ford and Alexander Graham Bell. He even went so far as to say he turned down handsome salaries from these presidents just to serve his country for free. But look at the historical record, and there's absolutely no evidence for any of these claims. It was all pure, brazen fiction. No way, right?
Now, you might be wondering, okay, is there any proof he met famous people? Well, there is exactly one verifiable photograph of Hill with a famous innovator, and that's Thomas Edison. But the true story behind it is just hilariously awkward. In 1923, Hill essentially crashed a convention of Edison dealers, forced this super quick photo with Edison, and presented him with a fake Napoleon Hill Golden Rule medal. According to reports at the time, Edison simply returned the medal without a single comment. Hill, of course, circulated the photo far and wide to legitimize his brand. Because why wouldn't he?
So what was Hill actually doing during all those years he claimed to be, studying success? Well, mostly he was constantly running from the law. In 1908, he ran the Acre-Hill lumber scam, buying lumber on credit and selling it for cash before fleeing across state lines. In 1909, he started a completely fake auto college, jumped in 1915, and his unaccredited George Washington Institute was shut down for violating blue sky laws. And in 1923, he committed outright charity fraud. He was a serial swindler whose entire racket was just constant reinvention to stay one step ahead of the cops.
Let's break down the sheer, devious mechanics of just one of these schemes, the Automobile College of Washington. Step 1, start an unaccredited college promising a super lucrative career. Step 2, charge prospective students for the training.
Step 3, use those paying students as free, clueless labor to build actual Washington-brand cars for a motor corporation in a warehouse. It was brilliant, it was highly fraudulent, and eventually he had to flee when his partners finally jumped ship.
But he sank much lower than just some bad business deals. Under the guise of the Golden Rule, Hill started a charity called the Intrawall Correspondence School. The pitch was to help Ohio prisoners rehabilitate. He toured churches, even collecting money from school children, eventually amassing over $1,000, which was a massive sum of money in 1923. But the prison warden and the chaplain later told the press that they never saw a single dime of it. Hill had completely pocketed the charity funds. It's genuinely disappointing to see just how low he was willing to go.
And that brings us to 1937, the year the ultimate guide to wealth, Think and Grow Rich, was officially born. But the reality of its creation is a pretty stark contrast to its actual message. While he was sitting there writing the definitive manual on how to become a millionaire, he was completely penniless, divorced, and actively hiding from his creditors. He actually had to move into his son Blair's cramped New York apartment just to have a roof over his head.
So, the crucial point is, Hill didn't write this masterpiece alone. Enter Rosa Lee Beeland, his 29-year-old new wife. She is really the unsung hero of this text. According to the sources, Rosa Lee was heavily responsible for making the book readable. She was this tireless companion who organized, edited, and practically rewrote his rambling, incoherent thoughts into the structured, persuasive masterpiece that would go on to sell 15 million copies. And here is the truly tragic irony of the book's success. To even finish the manuscript, Hill had to borrow $300 from his son, Blair. But when the book became a massive hit and the royalties started rolling in, Napoleon and Rosa Lee, they bought flashy cars and a Florida estate, completely ignoring Blair's request to be repaid. This prompted Blair to write a letter calling his own father an unscrupulous, holier-than-thou, two-timing, double-crossing, good-for-nothing. Yikes.
Okay, let's move to and see how this builds, because with wealth finally in his grasp, Hill's philosophies took on a total life of their own, leading to the most bizarre, kind of cult-like epilogue of his entire career. And it forces us to ask the strangest question of this entire explainer. What happens when you apply these extreme visualization and positive thinking concepts to a literal baby? To answer that, we have to look at Peace Haven. This was a massive 110-room Long Island mansion belonging to a group called the Master Metaphysicians. Led by a really charismatic guy named James B. Schaefer, this was effectively a cult of nearly 10,000 followers who used Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich as their holy text. They believed that the human mind could alter the material world entirely. Basically, if you visualized it, it would absolutely happen. So this cult decided to run a bold, honestly terrifying experiment. They informally adopted a 5-month-old girl named Baby Jean. The master metaphysicians declared they were going to raise an immortal baby. They seriously believed that by raising her on a strict vegetarian diet and surrounding her strictly with positive thoughts, she would literally live forever. And deeply tied to this whole madness was Napoleon Hill himself, who was officially named Baby Jean's godfather.
The stunts surrounding this were completely unhinged. The cult leader Schaefer actually demanded that the 1939 World's Fair dig up the Westinghouse time capsule just so Baby Jean's footprints could be added, claiming she'd be the only human alive to open it in the year 6940. He also filmed the poor baby posing with Hill's book. Not to be outdone, Napoleon and Rosa Lee did their own bizarre PR stunt, telling the national press they were going to adopt 15 children to raise as a social experiment. It never happened, but it certainly kept their names in the headlines.
So how do we reconcile the two halves of this incredibly strange story? On one hand, we have the undisputed blueprint for modern success, the psychological tools of visualization, organized planning, and persistence that genuine real-life business titans use to build rockets and billion-dollar brands today. But on the other hand, we have the origins of these ideas, the desperate rantings and fabrications of an admitted con man who literally stole from charities.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is an insight from a modern reader on Good Novel. They noted that despite the author's pretty massive flaws, the book's psychology actually underpins real, actionable habits today, like gold journaling and forming mastermind groups. As they put it, the book's genius is its universality. Whether you're a billionaire or a baker, the mindset works if you do. The framework functions perfectly, entirely independent of its creator's actual moral character.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to ponder.
We know Napoleon Hill faked his meetings with Carnegie, we know he stole from his business partners and lived a life of absolute chaos. But we also know his book has undeniably helped millions of people achieve real, tangible success. So if a scammer's lies, repackaged as the law of attraction, genuinely help you to succeed, does the historical truth even matter? Can we completely separate the art from the con artist? Thank you for watching this explainer. I'll leave you to think on that one.